Over a year ago, an extraordinary event unfolded in my life that my partner often refers to as the incident. We deliberately avoid delving into the details of that peculiar occurrence. In the month of June the previous year, I relocated to North Dakota to be with my significant other. Given the opportunity, I secured a position as a park ranger at Badlands National Park, relishing daily conversations about nature and regular hikes. As the season neared its end, many rangers, including myself, faced layoffs, with the remaining few assigned to campground hosting and store management. Late in the fall, with a diminishing number of campers, I closed up the camp store for the day and decided to embark on a brief hike to witness the sunset. Equipping myself with boots and a knee brace to support a previous biking injury, I pondered the alternative of heading for a beer or simply returning home. Little did I realize that this decision would shape the tale I share with you today. This particular trail held a special place in my heart within the park. It used to be a favored spot among fellow rangers for its secluded nature, panoramic views, and occasional prairie dog sightings. Even as many colleagues moved on, it remained a cherished hiking route for me. On that evening, however, an eerie stillness enveloped the surroundings. No animals, no breeze, no passing cars, just an unsettling silence. Although the absence of prairie dogs and the quietude seemed fitting after months of noise, an unspoken unease lingered in the air. As I ascended rapidly, leaving the park's base behind, I suddenly detected an overwhelming odor. It was a medley of scents hitting me all at once: wet fur, a nasty smell similar to a decomposing carcass left out in the sun. The stench was unmistakably close. Gagging on my knees for a moment, I recovered and attempted to locate the source of this stench. Not a single trace of any unfortunate animal greeted my search, not even a squirrel. I pressed on, convinced that the smell would vanish with further movement. To my dismay, the foul odor persisted. Determined to shake off the disturbing sensation, I pushed forward, rationalizing that a bit more walking and a straightforward climb up a rocky surface would dispel my fears. That was the narrative I constructed for myself. As I approached the rock face, my pace quickened. A slip on loose gravel resulted in a painful overextension of my injured knee. The sharp pain surged through my ACL, forcing me to brace against the rock face, gritting my teeth to stave off tears. With eyes tightly shut, I became aware of an unfamiliar breathing pattern, a far cry from the familiar pants of a Labrador or the snorts of a bear. This breathing was methodical, controlled, and eerily consistent. Unable to think coherently, my instincts screamed at me to climb. Fueled by pain and fear, my ascent became a frenzied scramble. Upon reaching the summit, I collapsed onto the dirt, gasping for breath, knees throbbing. It took several moments to regain composure. As I prepared to spit off the rocky ledge and tasting metallic on my tongue, I realized something was amiss. Right where I had begun to climb, an imposing figure stood, a creature taller than any ordinary person. It sported a bare animal skull for a face, adorned with large deer antlers. The legs were those of a deer, while the rest of the body resembled that of a human, emaciated and skin tightly drawn over its bones. Kneeling and facing each other mere feet apart, an intense gaze locked our eyes. The creature's ribs expanded rhythmically with each breath. Paralyzed by a mix of dread and curiosity, I awaited some aggressive action, but none came. Instead, the creature, in one fluid motion, clenched its jaw. Blood oozed from its mouth as it bit its tongue, breaking into a twisted smile. For those residing in the Dakotas, you might have caught wind of the subsequent events in the local newspaper. An injured hiker, evidently deranged, staggering into a grocery store and raving about an unsettling encounter in the Badlands. Hospitalized for the night, but I returned to work the following day, only to discover that the next round of layoffs had occurred. Perhaps my employer acknowledged the unexplainable occurrences in the wilderness, cautioning the need for vigilance to avoid witnessing the inexplicable. Unemployed and intrigued, I delved into internet searches about the Badlands and unusual park experiences nationwide. My best guess now is that I narrowly escaped an encounter with a Wendigo, and the scar on my tongue, a constant reminder. May this account serve as both enlightenment and a cautionary tale. Grateful for the reassurance that I am not alone, I share my story with you. A couple of summers ago, I ventured up to the Boundary Waters canoe area in Minnesota. It's a serene spot with lakes and forests that let you forget about the hustle and bustle of everyday life. I've always felt more at ease in nature than in the city, seeking solace and a connection to the wilderness, but that particular August was hotter than usual. In need of a break from my landscaping job and the monotony of perfectly manicured lawns, I packed my gear and set off for a spot close to the Canadian border. I prefer solitude. The tranquility has a special place in my heart. Setting up camp on the first day was pretty routine. I pitched my tent, gathered firewood, and even constructed a makeshift shelter, although I struggled to recall the process at first. As the evening wore on, I relaxed by the fire, preparing a simple meal and indulging in some marshmallows. Normally, the forest is serene, with only the gentle rustle of the wind and the occasional owl hooting. However, that night, as the fire reduced to embers, an unsettling feeling crept over me. It felt as though I wasn't alone. Despite my extensive experience in the woods, this sensation of being watched was unfamiliar. I chalked it up to the silence playing tricks on my mind and retired to my tent, trying to shake off the strange vibes. The following day brought peculiar occurrences. Rising with the sun, I brewed coffee over the dying fire and set out to gather more wood. As I ventured deeper into the woods, sunlight filtering through the canopy and casting shifting shadows, the sensation of being observed returned accompanied by a foul odor. It was overpowering, a mixture of decay, sweat, and something primal. The stench hung thick in the air, causing a lump to form in my throat despite the breeze. The absence of birdsong only amplified the silence. When the forest grows that quiet, it's unnerving. Everything felt unnaturally calm, and I couldn't shake the odor. By afternoon, a sound that wasn't human pierced the stillness, and the noise reverberated among the trees, unlike anything I'd ever heard. Frozen in place, my heart racing, I saw nothing but trees, yet an acute sense of awareness enveloped me, akin to prey sensing an approaching predator. Thereafter, the forest silence took on a different quality. I found myself constantly glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to glimpse a figure lurking amidst the trees, but there was nothing, only the woods and that unsettling odor. Deciding not to tempt fate, I hastened back to camp, quickening my pace while suppressing the urge to flee outright. The feeling of being pursued persisted, each rustle or snap jolting my nerves, and when a branch cracked behind me, I refrained from looking back, maintaining my stride. Upon reaching camp, the sun had begun its descent, casting the forest into twilight. I rekindled the fire more for reassurance than warmth, rationalizing that it was all in my head, the paranoia and the odor, yet deep down, a sense of unease lingered. Sleep eluded me that night, each rustle outside my tent jolting me awake. You know how it is when every noise seems amplified as you struggle to sleep? Tossing and turning, I endeavored to convince myself of the normalcy of the situation, attributing the nocturnal sounds to the usual woodland chorus. However, the memory of that unearthly cry persisted, intruding upon my thoughts despite my efforts to suppress it. The following morning found me bleary-eyed and fatigued. Preferring to remain near camp, I forewent any ambitious excursions, opting instead to gather nearby wood, tend to the fire, and unwind. Curiously, the forest had reverted to its usual ambience. Birdsong filled the air, and the noxious odor had disappeared, as if the events of the previous day had never transpired. Yet the memory of that eerie sound lingered, defying rational explanation. The day passed uneventfully, so I engaged in a bit of fishing, immersed myself in a book, and savored the serenity. However, as nightfall approached, a sense of disquiet once again descended. The woods undergo a transformation after dusk, with every shadow seeming to conceal a lurking presence. I stoked the fire vigorously that night, deriving more comfort from its glow than warmth. There's a primal reassurance in firelight, isn't there? It creates a sanctuary of sorts, shielding one from the darkness. I prepared a simple dinner and attempted to relax, though the prickling sensation on the nape of my neck persisted. As the night wore on, the forest resounded with nocturnal symphonies, the hoots of owls, the rustle of leaves, and the occasional splash from the lake. Striving to focus on these familiar sounds, I found myself hyper-aware, attuned to every subtle shift in the nocturnal landscape. Though sleep eluded me, exhaustion eventually claimed me, and I drifted into a disrupted slumber, each interruption heightening my anxiety. When dawn broke, I awoke groggy and disoriented, the remnants of sleep clinging to me like a heavy fog. Emerging from my tent, I noticed something wrong. The items strewn about outside, my backpack, boots, and gear, appeared subtly displaced. Surely I couldn't have rearranged them in my sleep. Surveying the campsite, everything else seemed undisturbed, yet I couldn't shake the conviction that an unseen presence had intruded upon my solitude while I slept. Resolving to depart immediately, I dismantled my camp, extinguished the fire, and left without looking back. The journey back was fraught with tension. Every rustle or snap set my heart racing, my senses attuned to the slightest disturbance, yet I encountered no further anomalies. Upon reaching my vehicle, I loaded my belongings and left without delay. The drive home was somber, my thoughts consumed by the inexplicable events of the past days. I've revisited the woods since, but never alone, and never to that particular area of the Boundary Waters. Some mysteries are best left undisturbed. And that concludes the account of my most peculiar camping excursion. It prompts reflection, doesn't it? What lurked in the shadows that night remains a mystery. It all started when I was cruising through the back roads of West Virginia. I had this vacation planned, and I needed to drop off my dog at a kennel I found online. Supposedly it was a fancy place, but finding it turned into quite an adventure. So there I was, driving my trusty old Ford along these narrow, winding roads, but the GPS on my phone wasn't working, and I was trying to make sense of a printed map. The trees were dense on either side of the road, making it feel like I was driving through a tunnel of greenery. It was getting late, and I started worrying they might close before I arrived. I should have left earlier, but you know me, always leaving things to the last minute. As I'm driving, I noticed something odd on the side of the road. At first, I thought it was a person, which was strange given how remote the place was. It stood there, just off the road, tall and peculiar is the only word I can think of. It had these big, shiny red eyes, and its body was like a person's, but covered in what seemed like dark, tangled hair, or maybe feathers. It's hard to tell. The weirdest part was the wings. Yeah, wings. Huge, bat-like wings folded behind its back. I swear, as I'm looking at it, it unfolds its wings, and they must have stretched at least 8 feet from tip to tip. I'm sitting there in my car, hand on the gear stick, unsure whether to speed away or stay put. My heart was racing, and I was trying to make sense of what I was seeing. But then it made this sound. Not quite a scream, more like a screech. I instantly thought of a dinosaur when I heard it. It was loud enough to make me wince. I'm not going to lie. I was terrified. Who wouldn't be? Whatever that thing was, it didn't seem natural. It took a step toward me. And that's when I decided I wasn't sticking around to find out what would happen next. I put the car in gear and zoomed off. I figured I could drive better going forward, so I just sped past it. Luckily, the kennel was only about a mile up the road, which I found without any more detours. I didn't mention anything about what I saw to the lady when I dropped off my dog. How could I? She'd think I was nuts. After leaving my dog with the kennel lady, I decided to book a room at a nearby motel. I needed to clear my head, and driving back immediately didn't seem wise, especially with night fully setting in. My house was only about 45 minutes away, but I wasn't in the right state of mind to deal with it. The motel was one of those budget places, but it was clean enough, and more importantly, it felt safe. I barely slept that night. Every little noise outside made me jump. I kept replaying the encounter in my mind, analyzing every detail. The way its eyes seemed to pierce through me, the eerie sound it made, the massive wings, all of it. The next morning, I decided to do some snooping around. My curiosity got the better of me. I started by asking the motel owner if he'd heard of any strange sightings in the area. He gave me a look, the kind that says, "Another crazy tourist," but surprisingly he started talking. Turns out I wasn't the first to have seen something inexplicable in those woods. He mentioned a few other guests over the years who had similar experiences. None as close as mine, but enough to make me feel less crazy. Feeling more validated, I headed to a local diner for breakfast. Small towns and their diners are perfect for gossip and stories. I casually brought up the subject with the waitress, and again, I was met with skepticism mixed with curiosity. She told me about the local legend of the Mothman and how it's been part of the town's lore for decades. Sightings, strange happenings, unexplained events, the whole deal. But here's where it gets really interesting. Another customer, an older guy who seemed like a lifelong local, overheard our conversation. He leaned over and, in a hushed tone, told me about an incident a few years back. A group of teenagers went into the woods for some late-night thrill and came back terrified, swearing they'd seen the Mothman. They described it just like I did. And the way this guy told the story, I could tell he didn't think it was just a tall tale. But now I had to make a decision. Should I head back home or stick around to find out more? Curiosity won, as it usually does with me. I had some extra time, so I decided to stay another night. I couldn't leave just yet, not with so many questions swirling in my head. That evening I went back to the diner partly because the food was good, but mostly because I hoped to overhear more stories or maybe get into a conversation again. And guess what? I got lucky. There was a group of locals at the table next to mine, and they were discussing something about the woods. I couldn't help but eavesdrop. One of them, a middle-aged guy who looked like he spent a lot of time outdoors, was talking about strange noises he'd heard while hunting in the woods. Feeling a bit bold, I chimed in and shared a bit of my experience, leaving out the more unbelievable parts. To my surprise, they didn't laugh me off. Instead, they listened intently, and a couple of them even shared their own strange encounters. Red lights in the sky they couldn't explain, strange patterns of dead wildlife, and untraceable sounds. None of them had seen the actual creature, but they all believed there was something unusual about those woods. The next day, I decided to go back to the spot where I saw the Mothman. I know, it sounds like a bad idea, but I needed to see it in daylight. Maybe I'd find some evidence, a feather, footprints, anything to prove I wasn't just seeing things. I drove back to the same spot in the morning. It looked completely different in the daylight. Less intimidating, more like an ordinary piece of forest. I got out of my car and cautiously walked around. But there was nothing, just trees, bushes, and the regular sounds of the forest. Feeling a bit foolish, I was about to head back to my car when I noticed something unusual in the dirt on the side of the road. A large print. It was too big for a deer, and the shape was all wrong for anything else I could think of. Could it be? And with that, I decided it was time to head back. This little adventure had taken up more of my time than I planned, and honestly, I was starting to feel a bit out of my depth. Seeing something unexplainable is one thing, but trying to chase down answers is another. So I started the drive back home to start my vacation. The whole way back, I kept turning over the events in my mind. What did I really see that night? I wish I had clearer answers for you. When I got home, I logged into a couple of online forums, asking if anyone could identify what I saw, but no clear answers there either. That's pretty much where my story ends. I had an encounter that I can't explain. I found some weird footprint that might be nothing, and I've got more questions than when I started. But hey, it's not like I can change anything. Sometimes you just don't get all the answers you want. If anything else comes up, or if I hear back from anyone on those forums with a plausible explanation, I'll definitely let you know. As I drove along the snowy roads in my UPS truck, the familiar routine of delivering packages seemed never-ending. Northern Ohio near Lake Erie was my stomping ground where winter cold matched the seriousness of football season. On that chilly December 23rd night, with only a few deliveries left, thoughts of wrapping my kids' presents urged me to push through the snow. Navigating a scarcely defined road, barely more than a tree-lined path, I couldn't wait to finish my shift. The falling snow intensified, challenging my visibility, but my nearly 10 years on the job had made me strong. Tuning into some tunes, I concentrated on the addresses, unaware that an extraordinary encounter awaited me. Reaching the last house on my route, situated in a secluded spot, I wondered who lived in such isolation. Grabbing the package, I stepped out, only to witness a confusing sight. A creature standing on two legs covered in gray and white fur blended into the snowy landscape. Its eyes, resembling those of a cat, peered through the darkness. I held the package like a shield, trying to make sense of the strange scene. Was it a prank? But its striking size, at least 7 feet tall, and the frightening look ruled out any human trickery. Confused, I considered every tale of strange creatures, realizing this might be the start or end of such stories. Attempting to understand, I took a step back, and it responded by taking a step forward. We engaged in a strange dance in the snow, surrounded by the sounds of my boots crunching, the truck idling, and the silent woods. Thoughts raced through my mind. Should I drop the package and run? But my professionalism prevailed. I approached the house, left the package, and hastily left. The creature never ventured closer. Driving away, I kept an eye on the rearview mirror, half expecting to see those mysterious eyes following me. The falling snow heightened my senses, making every sound from the truck unnervingly loud. Convincing myself it was just the cold and the aging truck, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Returning to the distribution center brought a sense of safety. Although the normality within offered comfort, the feeling of being observed lingered. Locking up the truck, I headed inside, concealing my unsettling experience from my remaining colleagues. Clocking out, I opted to keep the strange encounter to myself. The drive home, although nerve-wracking, ended with me sitting in my car, absorbing the security of the familiar surroundings. Inside, the Christmas tree still glowed, and my wife, awaiting my return, stirred on the couch. I avoided the truth, claiming my night was uneventful, not ready to confront the reality of what I had experienced. Christmas Eve, a day off, prompted me to research local legends and cryptid sightings in Ohio. Online forums revealed stories matching my own, mysterious glimpses, unexplained noises, and the feeling of being watched. The term Dogman emerged, aligning with the creature I had encountered. A chilling realization settled in. I wasn't the first to witness it. The following days were a mix of work and research, each late shift and rural road triggering a glance into the rearview mirror. I discovered others who had seen, felt, and been haunted by the same creature. The encounter became a story etched within me, a tale that changed something. Life resumed its routine, but the memory remained. On late shifts or rural roads, the rearview mirror became a silent witness to my persistent glances. I remained torn between wanting to validate my sanity and fearing the possibility of facing the creature again. The story continued, and I found myself still dealing with the mystery, wondering what else lurked in the snowy darkness. Let me share this wild tale that happened to me not long ago. It all went down in a tiny town in Montana where I have this cozy cabin right near a thick forest. Folks around there always chatter about strange things near the woods, but I never paid much mind to those stories. I just wanted some peace and quiet. The first day was all normal as I was chilling in my snug cabin, nothing fancy but comfy, decided to take a hike and soak in the sights. The forest was huge and it felt like I was the only soul out there. Towering trees, the gentle babble of a creek nearby, birds singing away. It was serene. As the sun started to dip, I thought of heading back when I caught this odd sound. It was low, almost like a whisper, or someone murmuring softly, but not quite. I figured it might be the wind, but something about it felt off, brushed it off and kept strolling. Then I spotted it by the creek, crouched down. This creature was unlike anything I had ever seen. Its skin had this strange, scaly texture like a lizard but much bigger, and those eyes, bright yellow, seemed to pierce right through me. When it glanced my way, fear gripped me like never before. I froze, unable to move, and just locked in a stare with this thing. It felt like it was sizing me up and trying to figure out what to do. Never felt so scared in my life. It wasn't just its appearance, but the whole vibe was wrong, like I stumbled into something I shouldn't have. Strangest part? It didn't attack. Just kept eyeing me before wandering off into the trees, moving oddly upright. It was like it had a mission, knew exactly where it was going, not like any animal I'd seen. I knew I had to bolt, but my legs wouldn't budge. I was glued to the spot, fixated on where the creature vanished. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. It was like my brain refused to believe what I'd witnessed. Then I heard it again, that eerie sound, but closer this time, coming from where the creature had vanished. It was like something pulling me toward it against my better judgment. So I started following, slow and quiet. Each step felt heavy, like time stretched out. The forest around me seemed different, darker, colder, and sounds suddenly warped, like I was underwater or dreaming. I trekked on, shadows playing tricks, glimpses of scaly skin. Couldn't tell if it was real or my mind messing with me. Finally, I spotted the creatures again, gathered in a clearing, communicating in that same low hum. They were tall with long limbs, moving gracefully but terrifyingly. Didn't seem to notice me or care, like I was nothing to them. It hit me then, whatever they were up to, it was ancient, sacred, and I was trespassing. I stood there watching, feeling like an intruder in their world. Time blurred as they dispersed, vanishing back into the forest and leaving behind an eerie calm. I waited, then bolted back to the cabin, and my heart still pounding. Locked up tight, trying to convince myself it was all in my head, but deep down, I knew it was real. I'd stumbled upon something beyond my understanding, something that changed everything. That night I lay awake, pondering those creatures. Who were they? What did they want? And the scariest thought of all, what if they caught me?